Salvete omnes, welcome to the AP Latin live stream for this Wednesday, Hump Day. We're excited to be with you here today. We're going to be doing some exciting things with the ablative and also starting to look at Caesar's de Bello Gallico, Book 4. So I'm Jenny Luongo. More about that later, as always.
And I'm Ben Johnson, and I think we have a pair deck to get to.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. With no delay. So if you guys want to get out your devices, you can go to joinpd.com. And then you've got these 5 letters to type in, RLCVZ. The mnemonic today is red lemons conduct victorious zebras.
Yeah, I'm gonna join this one.
Awesome.
Let's see.
So
I can win.
yeah. Well, I mean, everyone's a winner on Pear Deck. That's
true.
one thing I like about Pear Deck. Everybody's a winner on Pear Deck.
Hopefully, I have lots of dot draggings on this one, right?
Oh yeah, tons of dragging of dots today. And by popular demand, we're going to be focusing again on the ablative case.
Ooh, everyone's fun. Everyone should be joining now, right? Ablative use review.
Absolutely. Did you get that one? Absolutely. Ablative. Okay, well, we'll get to that in just a minute. But but yeah, it seems that there is always a need. There's so many different uses of the ablative. We'll talk a little bit probably about accusatives and datives more before the exam is my guess, but definitely want to review ablatives. So I'm going to get started on this pair deck, but you can still go to joinpd.com even after I've gotten it started. And our letters are R, L, C, V, Z. So on this first tile, I believe you've got a multiple choice. So if you'll kind of hover over the bottom, you can get to that. We want to know what kind of ablatives these are. So we're looking today at Caesar's de Bello Gallico, Book 4, reviewing it, assuming you've already seen it before with your teachers.
Or jumping straight into the water here, as you might say, right? With our standard, with our eagle.
Exactly. We're ready to go today. So this is the beginning of Book 4, and as always, Caesar calls the people, the non-Romans, the barbarians. So he says, "But the barbarians," and then we get "Concilio Romanorum cognito promisso equitatu et esse dariis."
Lots of words there.
Yes, exactly. So let's see what people are thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Good guess, guys.
Bad joke.
These are ablative absolutes that we were looking at first. So with the plan of the Romans known and with the cavalry and war chariots sent out. All right, so now we're looking at quo genere. Same thing again. We want you to try to identify which kind of ablative that we're looking at here. And just a reminder, while we're getting some responses on this question, what kind of ablative are those quo genere words in quo plerumque genere in proeliis uti consuerunt? Just a reminder that you can still go to joinpd.com and join in the fun of the pair deck. The letters today are R, L, C, V, Z, if you're having trouble seeing those. And this is a trickier one because it's not one of those kind of easy ablative absolute things that's totally clear, right?
Yeah, there's a key word here, right? That we should be looking at.
It's a challenging word though, because
super challenging,
it's spelled the same way as another word that
as another word.
As another word. So yeah, you guys, here we were looking at that word uti, which sometimes is another form of ut, and sometimes it's the second principal part, it's the infinitive of utor, and that's what's going on here. So we had an ablative with special verb.
One of these days we're going to have a pair deck where the login code is PUFFV.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And that would be awesome.
Yeah. We should ask for a special one.
Yeah, we should.
So yeah, as we're looking at this next question, I'll just tell you, the kind which quo genere they were accustomed to use in battles generally is the translation of that clause we were just looking at last. So just a reminder, you can still join us. Joinpd.com, RLCVZ. And now we're looking at Nawibus. What kind of ablative is Nawibus? Let's see how we're doing.
The key here is probably the word agredi.
Yeah. So they were having followed reliquiscopies with the remaining troops. They were keeping our guys. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah. They were keeping them from the ships, from exiting those ships. So good job switching over to ablative separation if that was problematic for you.
One of the things with that, like sometimes if you look at a verb that the ablative is kind of dependent on, and you see a prefix, like a prefix that has de or a, or in this case, it was the prefix a or x, like that's often going to take an ablative of separation. Like the from is actually embedded in the verb itself.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we want you to drag a red dot here over an ablative location, or I would call it an ablative of place where. Different teachers use different terminology, so don't worry about that. And then a blue dot over the ablative of accompaniment. So Caesar in this section says, because of these reasons, right, the things that we just learned, it was the highest difficulty. Because, quote, the ships non poterant were not able constitui to be anchored propter magnitudinem because of their size. And then we're going to get to Nissi in alto, except in the deep. That definitely is one of the ablatives of location that is in this section. There may be some others. Is there another one?
There are, yeah, there's a bunch actually. We bolded some, but there's obviously others that we didn't bold. So it looks like the ignotis locis could be an ablative of location. It's also, some people take it as an ablative absolute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see a lot of red dots there. So good job. So in unknown places.
So then there's also in fluctibus.
Mm-hmm.
Which someone actually pointed out.
Yeah, we've got somebody there, and we've got somebody on notissimis loci, so in the well-known places.
Yeah, so all those are good.
Yeah,
nice
they
job.
did really
all the
well
red
on
dots
that.
are all the red dots are perfectly placed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the ablative of accompaniment is going to require a cum. Am I right, Ben?
Usually.
For the most part.
Usually.
Usually. Okay. Kids hate it when the grammar rules aren't always, but usually
Here
you're going to need a cum. Here it does. So, erat pugnandum. Our soldiers had to fight cum hostibus, with the enemies in these really difficult situations. So
verbs of fighting take an accompaniment. You don't fight someone, you fight with someone.
With someone. Yeah. So if you're not over that cum hostibus, think about moving your blue dot there. Oh, good job. Good job, kids. Thank you. All right. So now we're still looking at this same section, but now we're looking for ablative of means with your orange dot and an ablative absolute with your purple dot. We talked a little bit about this, but our soldiers, however, militibus autem, in unknown places, with their hands encumbered, oppressed by heavy and serious burden of weapons, simul at the same time, de navibus deciliendum, they had to jump down from the ships, they had to stand in fluctibus in the waves, and they had to fight with the enemy. We were just talking about all of that. So let's see how we're doing on the ablative of means. I see a lot of people on that magno et gravi onere.
I think a lot of people just put their dots over the words ablative of means.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that burden, a lot of times when we ask for an ablative of means, we really want the noun, not the adjectives that are agreeing with it. So magno et gravi are agreeing with the onere, but that noun is what we want. The burden of the weapons is what we want it on. And then ablative absolutes, we mentioned that some people see ignotis locis as an ablative absolute. Impeditis manibus is an ablative absolute. We've got
Omnibus membris expeditis.
yes, that's
Yeah.
also
Notissimis locis down there too.
yeah. So all of those could be ablative absolutes.
We should point out too that the militibus in line 2 at the end of line 2 is a dative. It's a dative of agent in here because of the gerundives, consistendum and pugnandum and deciliendum. So even though it looks ablative, it's actually dative there. And that oppressis is also dative because it agrees with that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so what kind of ablative is this? Here you've got some options, so you can go ahead and start choosing those. So nostri per teriti, our guys terrified, and imperiti, unskilled, completely omnino in this type of fighting.
That type being amphibious assaulting, is that
Right,
exactly?
exactly. I can imagine feeling pretty unskilled.
If only Caesar had foreseen that they would have to do this.
I know. How could he have? They were completely unused to this. All right. So that he's quibus rebus. Sorry, I was forgetting what the words were. Our guys terrified by these things. That is an ablative of means. So those of you who are thinking, oh, maybe it's an ablative absolute. No, you guys on ablative of means are totally right.
Not every 2 words are ablatives absolute.
Right, exactly. So terrified by something, that's an ablative of means. Now we want to check in on these ablatives. And again, there may be a word that we talked about before that they want to focus on. Non eadem alacritate ac studio quo in pedestribus uti proiliis consuerant ute bantur. So ute bantur, they were not using is a good clue here, right, Ben?
Yeah, there's also the uti, that a couple of words before too, which is also a form of utor.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hoping, yes, it's a puffy verb again. Good job. They were not using like the same swiftness, the same speed and eagerness, which consuerant, they were accustomed uti to use in pedestribus proiliis. So now one more last choice on this pair deck. What kind of ablative is this in pedestribus proiliis? We'll give them a few minutes and then don't worry, we're still
the word in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not absolutely.
And it's
indubitably. How about
indubitably. That? It's not an ablative absolute, kids, because ablative absolutes never use in. Oh, good. Ablative of location.
No, it's tempting to take it as the object after uti, right?
It is, but in I think always has to be an ablative of location. There's not any other.
Well, yeah, we messed them up by putting the in on a different line.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we were being tricky.
Yeah, you have to actually. This is one of those times where you actually have to understand the Latin. You can't just look for the hints.
They did very well, though.
Yes. Where's my? Okay.
Yeah. Time for our other slideshow.
Yeah. We'll just have a little more FaceTime. There we go. Until we get it up. Wait. Holy cow. Oh,
it's
nope. Didn't work.
It's coming slowly but surely. Slowly but surely, kids. So just to let you know what's coming, this is the AP Latin live stream. We're going to be reviewing Caesar's A Bello Gallico today. We have done a pair deck. I'm Jenny Luongo. I teach at St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Austin, Texas. You are welcome to tweet at either of us during this live stream. My handle is @Parwa Luongo.
And I'm Ben Johnson. I teach at Hamden Academy in Hamden, Maine, where it snowed again today. Just spitting snow. So nothing big, but I mean, it was white on the ground this morning. And then even just like an hour ago, there were some flakes coming down. You can tweet at me at Latin Tutorial. And we are taking comments if you want to, all throughout the live stream. Every so often we get someone who has a question or just wants a shout out. And so we try to comply appropriately, but also if you have questions about what we do here, or maybe about if you missed something regarding the AP test, if we know the answer, then we'll try to address it as best we can. So you can tweet at us if you're watching not synchronously, if you're watching on your own time.
Yeah, and my friend Nicole Lehman, who teaches Latin in San Antonio, tweeted yesterday that she was excited that she did well in the Kahoot, but her daughter won, who is an AP Latin student. So that's very exciting.
Wow, you have a lot of friends that watch this. I don't think any of my friends
I'm
watch
lucky
this.
that way.
So we had some homework for you guys to do, and we wanted you to write a well-developed essay that analyzes how both Caesar and Dido reveal their leadership styles in their responses. So probably 3 pages, 4 or 5 pages would be good. This is something that would be like a Q3 on a regular AP exam. We're not doing the essay this year. But it is important because you can treat this as kind of like an extended reading comprehension. Like, do you know what's going on in these passages? And if you, for the most part, if you understand Latin in general, and you can read Latin, then you're good on most of these, most of the types of questions that we'd be asking here. So let's start off with the Gallic War and describe what's going on there. We're talking about the Helvetian migration here, and how the Helvetians wanted to go through the province. And so when it was announced to Caesar that that the Helvetians were trying to travel through the Roman province, we see that Caesar maturat ab urbe proficisci. He hurries to set out from the city being Rome, where he is right now, and to contend it, to hasten quam maximis potest itineribus, with as quick of journeys as he can, maybe like stations along the way, to go to further Gaul. And he reaches Geneva, and there one of his so he first like is he's quick to make decisions, and he's quick to try to get to the place where he's needed the most. And the first thing that he does there is he gets more troops, because there's only one legion in all of Gaul, and further Gaul, and so he orders conscripts to make more soldiers. And then the second thing that he does is he orders the bridge that was at Geneva to be cut down. So not only is he trying to make sure that he has enough forces to deal with the Helvetians when they get there, he also stalls them by removing one of their easy access points to the Roman province. And then we have the section about how Caesar was thinking about how the consul Lucius Cassius was killed by the Helvetians, and his army was defeated and sent under the yoke. He was thinking that they must not be granted permission to go through the province, because he didn't think, this is the neque homines inimico animo, that a people with a hostile mind, if they've been given the opportunity to travel through the province, would refrain from doing bad stuff. Temptaturos ab injuria et maleficio. And so because of that, he does the last thing here, which is he needs more time in order to have his soldiers arrive. And so he says that he would decide the matter at a different day. And so he's delaying here in order to make sure that he's able to collect all of his forces. Dido in Aeneid 1, 562 to 578 is addressing the concerns of Ilioneus, who he's in part of the Trojans who've been shipwrecked because of the storm. And Ilioneus is like, we're not here to rob you guys or to pillage your towns and stuff. We're just either headed to Sicily or to Italy. And she says, "Solvite corde metum," release fear from your heart, Trojans, and banish your anxieties. I only do these things because the Carthaginians are attacking the Trojans because they think that there may be pirates. It's this res dura et regni novitas. The hard situation and the newness of my kingdom force me to take these precautionary measures, and to guard our borders broadly, to watch over our borders broadly with the guard. So she apologizes, and she gives a rationale for what she's doing. And then she talks about how, yes, of course, we know all about Troy and the race of Aeneas. We actually know that's the case because Aeneas sees the a mural to the Trojan War in Carthage right now. And she says, we're not so dull-hearted, and we are Eastern people. We understand what's going on here. And if you want to go to Italy, or if you want to go to Sicily, like, I will provide you that help. So not only does she say, yes, we understand your plight, but she also tries to give some resources to help them along with that, because I think that she probably recognizes that they're in a similar situation as she and the Carthaginians are in, or used to be in. And then not only does she provide them with resources if they wanted to go, but she also says this vultis et his me comparater, considera regnis line. Perhaps you want to stay even with me in these kingdoms as equals too. This city is yours if you want it. Then she says that they can beach their ships. And she has this great line where she says the Trojan and the Tyrian will be essentially equals at this point. Which is great. I mean, she's offering her assistance, but also offering safe harbor for these Trojans if they don't have a leader, that they can kind of become part of her city, which is very gracious, I think. Definitely not what Caesar is doing here, because you have the Helvetians who are trying to find their new home, and he says, well, just wait for a little bit so that I can get an army up here to possibly kill you. Then she says, well, maybe you have a leader. If only Aeneas were here. Let me give you my resources to go search for him and see if we can find him. Maybe he's wandering around in some forest or cities or something like that. And so Dido's response is completely the opposite of Caesar. She is welcoming to these people, to these refugees. She is giving up more than she even needs to, and more than they even ask, whereas Caesar is trying as best he can to prevent them from coming in contact with his own civilization in some ways. So that's a little bit. You probably did a much better job in your essays, but that's what I have for you on this live stream with just a couple of minutes. So
hundreds for everybody, though.
Yeah, hundreds for me. Holy cow, that was a lot to talk about. Okay, so we're starting our review of Caesar Book 4 today. So we're going to do chapters 24 through the first sentence in chapter 36. And today we're doing 24 through 26. And this is a review. So we're going to assume that you've already read this, and we're going to focus on knowledge of Latin syntax and grammar. This is the section where he starts his, as we've kind of actually started with that pear deck, he starts his assault on Britain, and the British meet him in battle, actually, before his men can even get off their ships. We already did the exam practice, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the ablative, the many uses of the ablative, and this is only part one. There are a lot of uses of the ablative that you probably should be familiar with before you take this test. And so we'll cover them today at the end of this live stream, and also tomorrow we'll finish it up with the second half.
And we also did an earlier review of the ablative too. If you want to go back and look at those episodes, you can't review the ablative enough, because it's all over the place and it has all sorts of different uses. So resources for you in our bit.ly/AP Latin YouTube folder. You'll want to go ahead, if you haven't already, since we already did review one paragraph with you, hopefully you already had your stuff out, but if not, go ahead and get it out and let's get going. So we'll really continue with Caesar's De Bello Gallico 4.25. And so we know that as Caesar's men are approaching Britain, they are struggling. So, quod ubi Caesar animad vertit, when Caesar notices this, right? He's got to do something. So my students have learned to expect a usage somewhere. And here in the fourth line down, we see the usage. He ordered something, right? When Caesar notices that this is happening, he ordered something. So what four things does Caesar order? That kind of gives you the boundaries for where you should be looking. And also it helps to know that you're expecting maybe infinitives, which we tell you in question 2. So what type of infinitives are removere, incitare, constitui, propelli, and submovere? And then moving a little further down, after Caesar did this, we get quae res magno usui nostris fuit. So translate that for us. It's a double dative construction, which sometimes is tricky for students to know how to translate. So let's practice it. And number 4, what from the ships seemed to bother the British and caused them to retreat a little in lines 4 through 5? So we see that they paulum modo pedem retulerunt. They retreated just a little bit. So what caused them to do this? All right, how much time do you think we should give them, Ben, for their awkward wait time?
Let's give him like 15 seconds. I
Okay,
think I think it's nice how Caesar actually is able to notice when things aren't going well in battle, and he's able to provide assistance. Often, like when you look at even more modern battles, it's those decisions aren't made by the generals who sit a long ways back and who are dealing with the long-term strategy. Those decisions are made more by the frontline troops and so forth. And we know that Roman commanders did have the leeway to make decisions on the fly and stuff, sometimes to the great benefit of the Romans in battle, which is like their flexibility was one of the reasons why they were so successful. But here Caesar notices it, of course, because he
yes,
always takes credit whenever he can.
right, exactly. And, as always, it's hard for us to know exactly what's happening. We have Caesar's word to, tell us. So
He
we're going to
foresees
assume that
things that obviously
he's,
were going to happen.
yes, he is his best PR person.
Yeah.
So what he does is he, naves longas, he moved back the long ships, which are really the warships. That's an idiom there for his warships. He moved them back from the transport ships. Um, Ab honorari east navibus is the transport ships. Then he had them remis incitari. He ordered them to use their oars to position themselves ad latus apertum, at the open side hostium of the enemy. And then he ordered that they attack the enemy fundis, with slingshots, sagitis with arrows, tormentis with all sorts of artillery. So what kind of infinitives are those? They are an objective infinitive after use it. So after use it, we expect he ordered them to do something. And so the object of use it are those infinitives. Then we learned that quae res, this thing, fuit, was magno usui, of great use, was very useful nostris to our men. As you might expect, Caesar's always so useful. And then we learn that the barbarians, barbari permoti, they were thoroughly disturbed by figura, by the form of the ships and the motu, the movement of the oars, and the unaccustomed type of artillery that's being thrown at them.
Okay, so we even though Caesar's able to do all of those things and he's maybe able to start turning the tide of battle, the men are still staying on their transport ships, and this is a big problem. We're going to explore this passage specifically in greater detail for your homework. So we only really have a couple of questions here to kind of analyze that. And they are the dative of hostibus, which is in that third line. This is about the great story about the eagle bearer, who is going to be the guy who kind of pushes the men, encourages the men to go off by means of his own example. And he has this great speech of De silite inquit milites ni vultus aquilum hostibus. There's the hostibus prodere. So what type of dative is that? And then he says, the last sentence, he says, ego certe meum rei publicae atque imperatori officium praecitero. And so what types of datives are rei publicae in line 3 and imperatori?
In my AP class today, we met this morning. It was so nice to see them. We were talking about how one of the characteristics of the commentary is that Caesar really likes to highlight the bravery of the common soldier. So this passage is such a good example of that.
Usually, I think he knew, supposedly he knew the names of all of his centurions, right?
Mhm.
And we're talking about 60 centurions per legion. times how many legions, like 4 or 5 legions. So I mean, that's a lot of people to know, and that's not even counting like the officers, the legates and the quaestors and stuff like that. So I mean, that's pretty impressive. He doesn't know the name of this eagle bear though. Otherwise,
Well,
he
maybe
probably
he
would have
does. He
said
doesn't
it.
say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. They've had plenty of time. They only needed 2 datives.
Yeah. So the first one is a dative of indirect object, and that's after this verb protere. Jump down, he says, soldiers, unless you want to betray the eagle to the enemy. And protere, you can kind of see that D there. It kind of comes from dodare, and you look for indirect objects after verbs of giving or showing. So that's what hostibus is, to the enemy. And then he says, I certainly am showing off my duty, my officium for the republic and for the general imperator. They didn't have emperors at this time, so this is just the general, which is Caesar. And this is a dative of reference. And one of the ways that you can kind of look at datives of reference is thinking about advantage and disadvantage. And here the advantage is the republic is receiving the advantage of this eagle bearer showing off, doing his duty. And Caesar, the imperator, is also receiving the advantage of this, and that's why how you can kind of see that these are datives of reference. Sometimes also if they're translated as for, that's an easy way too. But
All right. So continuing on into 4.26.
he jumps down, by the way. He jumps down and he goes, and everyone follows.
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to have so much fun with their learning opportunity on that. So this next section, it starts with pugnatum est, this impersonal verb construction, which is common in Latin but awkward in English. So we want you to translate that first sentence for us. Then number 2, what kind of infinitives are insistere and subsequi that appear in the second line? What kind of ablative is notis omnibus vadis in the third line? What kind of ablative is inquietatis equis in the fourth line? And then what's the case and use of tella in line 5? We'll give you a little bit of time to think about that.
Yeah, tella ends in an A, so it's one of those words that you pay closer attention to.
Yeah, because you don't know whether it's the nominative or the accusative. You got to figure that one out.
Or ablative, could be ablative singular.
It could, but the word is telum, and I think they know it because they're smart kids. So it's not an ablative, kids. Don't say that. All right. So the first line says literally, it was fought fiercely by each side, but in English, more likely we would say both sides fought fiercely. And on these impersonal constructions, you can do that for your translation. It's just fine. Insistere and subsequi, it says our men, however, were able neither to do all of these things. They weren't able to keep their ranks. They weren't able to insistere, to stand firmly. They weren't able to follow signa, their standards. So these are complementary with poterant. What kind of ablative is notis omnibus vadis? Well, we learned that the enemy, on the other hand, is not having as much trouble. They are in all the well-known shallows, or with all the shallows well known, right? They know where they are. This is their
Or
territory.
because it could be a cause. It could be a causal
Or
use of the ablative
yes,
absolute, right? Because they knew all of the shallows.
exactly. So we've kind of talked about how ablative absolutes can be 2 things. This could be an ablative absolute or an ablative of cause. Either would be acceptable. Inquietatis equis, with their horses urged on, they were attacking ad aurea bantur, so that is an ablative absolute. And then we learn at the end that they were doing lots of things, right? So many of them were surrounding a few, and then some were koyikiebant, throwing their weapons onto everybody. Tell us. So it's the accusative direct object. All
Ooh,
right.
it isn't looking good for the Romans here, is it?
It is not. It is not.
Do you think Caesar's going to notice?
Quod cum animad vertisset, Caesar. Yeah, you got to
Okay.
expect that. And then he's going to use it, which
Right.
you should also expect.
Yes.
All right.
And so what kind of infinitive then is compleri? Hopefully you remember that from the last time we had to use it here. What case is his in line 2? So that's his subsidia submittebat. Translate it. Translate in hostes, so nostri simul in arido constituerunt, suis omnibus consecutis, in hostes impetum fecerunt. And then list one and only one thing the Romans did after they made it to land, and give the Latin to prove your answer. what is the case and use of Kaisari in line 5? That's a tough one. So yeah, so I think that Caesar is going to single-handedly turn the tide of this battle.
Utfit, as happens with Caesar.
So we talked earlier about how the verb eubeo or eubet or eubere and usid in the perfect tense takes an objective infinitive. So he ordered that the punts, the little dinghies of the warships, the longships, be filled. Cos compleveri is a passive infinitive with soldiers, and also the spy crafts to the speculatoria navigia. And wherever he saw that men were struggling, he was sending these ships to be subsidia, to be reinforcements to these men or for these soldiers. So that's what he says in the dative case, and you would translate with it too. You were sending reinforcements to them. Our guys, as soon as they got on dry ground with all of their men having followed, they made an attack in hostes against the enemies. And you can translate this probably singularly too, against the enemy, because we use the enemy singularly for a collective plural. But in plus that accusative person is often commonly translated as against too. If you've read Cicero's In Catilinam, that isn't a speech made into Catiline, that is a speech made against Catiline. So just think about that whenever you see a people reference in the accusative case after in. And then they put the enemy to flight. So after they landed, right, they attacked the enemy, they put the enemy to flight, eos in fugam dederunt, but they did not pursue the enemy very far. Neque longius prosequi potuerunt. And the reason why they did that is because the cavalry, as we will learn, their equites, weren't able to actually make it to the island for a variety of different reasons. And this actually was the one bad thing that ever happened to Caesar. And this use of Kaisari after the word defuit is a dative of possession. It's an interesting use of that, but Caesar was the one that possesses the former good luck here. So.
All right, so we're ready to check on some ablatives again.
With a gym kit.
Yes, I have a game kit for them.
Gym kit.
So, yeah. I think it's like GIF. You can say it either way, right? GIF.
It's GIF.
Okay.
It's
so,
GIF, but it's gym kit.
Okay, well, I'm going to say GimKit. So go to gimkit.com/play and enter these 5 numbers: quatuor, nihil, tres, octo, septem. And so what we're going to do again is have an opportunity to test on these ablative uses that we've been talking about. We're really practicing with the ablative today. So you guys are going to have an opportunity to play the GimKit. And while you're doing that, we're going to talk more about the ablative. So if you're totally into the GimKit and you want to play without hearing the answers, you can pause the video and then have us go over the answers afterwards. Or if you can multitask and you want to do the GimKit and hear us going over the answers, you can keep the video going. Or if you want to come back, we'll post the GimKit for you guys to play later. So again, it's quatuor, nihil, tres, octo, septem. I'm going to get that GimKit game going. I think that looks like it's about all of our players for now. And then we can go back and talk to them about what they're doing with those ablatives on GimKit.
So, go.
So we'll kind of take turns talking about the ablatives because there's so many of them. We couldn't get them all on one slide. So this might be a good screen for you to, come back to, screenshot, whatever. It's got lots of good notes for you on the ablative. So obviously ablative absolutes, we see them all the time. So you might have a noun and a participle, or two nouns sometimes. Caesare Duce with Caesar as leader, that we haven't seen one in this section.
Or also
Um,
with like ablative absolutes for the names of the year.
yes,
Yeah.
with with
Marcus Messala
Marcus
and
Messala
Marcus
and Marcus
Pupius Piso.
Pupius. Oh, I'm glad we got the Pupius in today as consuls. If it's that present participle that we were talking about the other day with the NT, then it's going to be with blank blanking. If it's the fourth principal part, that perfect passive participle, it's going to be with blank having been blanked. Then we talked about separation. Sometimes I separate out, there's a lot of separation here, the place from which from regular separation, but they're really the same thing. So don't worry about that. You can just call it separation. Ablative of means is when something has been done by something. So looking for a passive participle is a good idea. Like in this one, the men oppressed by the heavy load of their weapons. And then of course, those puffy verbs, potior, utor, fruor, fungor, wescor, we're gonna expect their object to be in the ablative. You can call it ablative with special verb or ablative of means, either one works.
Yeah, these officially are an ablative of means. We also have the ablative of manner, which is it shows the manner that something was done, and it's often like it often replaces an adverb, and we often use the word cum, but ignore the examples. The examples are kind of messed up, and we'll fix that. So if you look at for the manner, when the example is voce magna dixisset, he said this with a loud voice. The cum is optional. It's often there for ablative of manner, but sometimes in this situations, this is from Caesar with the Aquilifer. Actually, he doesn't use that cum. The ablative of accompaniment is an ablative that shows with whom something was done. And so this often also includes a cum, but doesn't always have to. But we have this with words of fighting. So from book 1, there's this phrase, cum Germanis contendunt, they fight with the Germans. Ablative of location shows where something happens. This might, Parwa, you might call this an ablative of place where.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
You know me.
It's sometimes with the preposition in, sometimes it isn't. In, on, at are great translations. Ignotis locis in unfamiliar places. And then there's the ablative of time when, which shows when something happened. Also in, on, at. And there's something coming up. It happened eadem nocte, on the same night. The way that I teach the ablatives, there are 3 big uses of the ablative. There's the separative ablative, the instrumental ablative, which is like the means, and then there's the location ablative, which is like the place where or the time when. So if you can kind of boil it down into those 3, the from translation versus the by or with translation versus the in or on translation, then you can maybe kind of figure out a little bit more detail to come up with these names. So, okay. Oh, do you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say the GIM kit went well. They did really well. Third place was Megna. Second place was Discipulus Jeremiah, I think. And first place was Will, which I have a Will who's really good at GIM kit. So we'll see.
I was in 22nd place because I had to work during
You had
it.
to work.
I
Yeah,
answered,
exactly.
2 questions. Okay, so big question to think about. Why does Caesar want to go to Britain? Like, why is he here? There's some hint. The thing that he tells us earlier on in book 4 is that he's in Britain because he hears that that's where like the resistance in Gaul is being organized. We find out later on in book 6 that he feels that the origins of the Druids is in Britain too. And so this is really maybe the heartland, according to Caesar, or what Caesar's intelligence tells him. And so he's headed there maybe to kind of like suppress it there so that he can deal with Gaul on his own. But there's also this little summary by Cassius Dio, who's a great historian, on Caesar's expedition to Britain that you might want to read, and maybe thinking about the things that he's that Cassius Dio talks about. Is it because Caesar wants to continue to expand and to become more famous and to be renowned for going to a place that the Romans even doubted existed? There's a point where they thought that Britain was a mythical place. Is it because maybe he just wanted more money? Because that's actually one of the prime motivating factors for Caesar in Gaul during this time. And he does become massively wealthy, and he does pay off a whole lot of debts with his time in Gaul. So whole lots of reasons. You can't necessarily trust what Caesar tells you, though, because there's always other things there that he's deciding not to mention, or that he maybe himself doesn't even know. So homework for tonight, this is that Aquilifer passage here. We have 6 questions. This is definitely to prepare you for the short answer questions that you'll see on the AP exam coming up on May 12th. Spend some time with this. It's definitely very good work for you. So you should enjoy that.
Yeah, and you can find that along with lots of other stuff in our resource folder, bit.ly/AP Latin YouTube. You can also give us feedback via this Padlet link, or as we mentioned before, anytime you want to tweet at us on Twitter. Also, just a reminder that if you need internet connectivity or mobile tools for the exam, it's important that you reach out to the College Board very soon at cb.org/tech. All right. Thank you guys for joining us today as we started book 4, and we're going to press on into book 4.
Like Caesar does into Britain.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. All right. Well, omnes.
Well,